But right, so this WebEx is centered around the Invu administration area. It's not particularly a training exercise. It's not a WebEx intended to give you end-to-end training within Invu administration. It's purely just an overview. I'll try and make it as high level as I can, but generally it's just an overview of some of the common areas within Invu administration that people either get confused with, or because they haven't seen the areas in quite a while, they just forget what needs to be done. So this is more of a refresher stroke overview. I've broken it up into a number of sections. The first being security. I think this does confuse a lot of people, especially when they're configuring new filing cabinets and giving users access to open documents. And that there can be a lot of confusion between privileges and security profiles, which I'll cover off in the section. The next area after that is users. So importing users, creating users, and just generally managing users, assigning privileges to those users, configuring their email addresses and things like that. For those of you who use workflow and email notifications, it's all centered around users. Following on from that, we'll go into global settings. I'll just cover off just a general overview in global settings on the general area, and also a section called notifications.
Has joined the conference.
And the notifications area is pretty useful purely because if there's any issues with any of the Invu services and things like that, you can configure notifications to be emailed out to yourself as an admin or a group, internally the group of IT admins, just to let you know that there's an issue. The next section we'll go on to is document reclaim. I'll cover off what that feature does in more detail, but it allows you to basically, in short, restore documents from user intros where a user is inactive. So I'll try and give a demonstration of that. And then we'll go into expunging documents. A lot of people may or may not know that you can, when a document's deleted from Invu, it doesn't get permanently deleted straight away. It goes into effectively a recycle bin. And in the expunge documents area in Invu allows you to either restore documents, specific documents or batch of documents in bulk, or you can just delete the whole lot, or you can delete individual documents or subset of documents. Auditing, querying the audit for specific events or a group of events, appending to an existing query that you've already just run, and also exporting the audit query that you've just carried out, so you can kind of formulate your own report around what you're trying to audit. The export is in its raw format, so there's no real formatting to it. It's on you to decide how you want to present that audit report. And then secure storage. If you've got multiple secure stores or even a single secure store, this is where you can just view where your documents reside effectively, physically on the server, as well as performing maintenance tasks such as re-indexes and compresses of the text and metadata indexes. And then the final section at the end is just scanning, scanner preset management, how to make changes, should you replace the scanner, what needs to be done, and just a general overview of where you can modify and alter scan settings and make changes to presets where needed. So if we move on to the first section, which is security. So just to cover off the difference between privileges and security privileges and security profiles. So pretty much as it says, the privileges are used to effectively define user functionality within the system. So that's just what they can do within the product as a whole. So you can dictate whether a user can search or can't search, use code-free, workflow, explore in trays, perform docref searches, pretty much anything within the product is defined within a privilege. A preset can be created as I've said, which defines certain privileges, and they can either be assigned to groups or users. Any users assigned to that group will therefore inherit that privilege. And then you've got security profiles. These security profiles effectively define what folder members are allowed to do within those folders. So that relates to documents within folders. So if you've got a profile assigned to a folder where you've removed the delete right, it basically means anybody who's a member of that folder can't delete. However, you can give users explicit rights beyond that. So if you wanted 5 out of 10 users to not be able to delete, but you wanted the other 5, you wanted to give them permission to delete, then you can add those users explicitly to the profile to give those users delete rights. So if I just come out of my slide, I'll give you a quick demonstration. So we've got a security profile here called General. And if we look at, so that's my security profile just called General. I've got a filing cabinet here called Webinar. If I right click on that cabinet and go to Edit Security, let me just re-add it, just so you can see. So if I add my General profile, as soon as I've selected it, on the right-hand side, I can now decide what I want users to be able to do within that cabinet. So I can say, okay, I want all users to open. I don't want them to delete. I don't want them to edit, but they can do a reindex if they want, and they can view the event history. I click OK, and if I view my members, I've got 2 users, my admin account and my test account. I'm currently logged in as my test account. So if I explore this folder, which I'm already in, I'll right click on the document. I can open it. I can't edit. It's grayed out. And there's no, and I can refile and save, but I can't delete. I can view the event history because that's what I gave the permission for that user to do. And likewise, if I logged in as my admin account, I would have the same permissions. But if I wanted my admin user to be able to do more, then I would go into my security profile, click on Access Rights, let me just do that again, click on Access Rights, click Add, select my user, add it to the profile, and then here I can explicitly define what my user wants, what I want my user to do. So I could give it full control, and I would be able to edit and delete the document. So I've done that. Click OK. The change is real time, so you don't need to restart the client or anything. And on my virtual machine over here, I'm logged in as my system admin user. And now if I right click on this, I've got the option to delete, which I didn't have before because the privilege wasn't there. So if I just go back to the profile, if I remove the system admin off the profile, that would then remove my delete right because it's the profile that dictates what it does. I've now removed the explicit rights that I had defined for myself. And what a lot of people tend to do is, because they don't understand how the security works, they will sort of add the profile to the folder and give and sort of enable the delete right, for example, but then afterwards go into the profile and explicitly add 20 users to it and then remove the delete right explicitly, which is kind of the wrong way to do it. When you assign a profile or configure a security profile for a folder, you should be configuring the bulk of what you want users to be able to do. So if you want the bulk of users to be able to delete or not delete, I'll use open as a better example. If you want the bulk of users to be able to open and file and save documents, then you set that at the profile level. But then if you've got a small subset of users that you want to be able to do more than that, as in delete or view the event history and things like that, then you explicitly add those users in to the profile, set those rights, and you're done. The other thing that a lot of customers do is kind of create security profiles en masse. They'll create a general profile, a HR profile. If we look at my filing structure here, I've got finance, HR, professional services. They'll create a profile for each department because the understanding of how security works just isn't there. What you can do is just create a general profile, an admin profile, and maybe a couple of others that kind of fill the gaps, and then just use those as basis for defining your security at the folder level, and then, if need be, at the user level by explicitly adding users to it. Because the more security profiles you have assigned to a folder, the more complex it can get when it comes to diagnosing and fault finding why user X, who shouldn't be able to delete, can delete. It tends to be because if you've got more than one security profile assigned to a folder, the profile with the greatest rights supersedes the other profile that may not have delete rights. So if you've got a profile that's got full control and that's assigned to a folder where there's also another profile assigned where you haven't got full control, you've sort of the only security setting that you've not got enabled on that secondary profile is delete. Because you've already got one there that's got full control, it will just override the one that's got the less, fewer options selected. And I guess that's the case with any sort of security model. If you've got multiple security settings defined, chances are it's the one that's got the elevated privileges that will override the one with the lesser privileges. So yeah, just a couple of things to be aware of when you're configuring security and trying to figure out why some users can see stuff when they shouldn't and can access stuff that they shouldn't, whereas you've got people who perhaps should be able to do things but can't. It's probably because there's more than one security profile assigned to the folder, or the explicit rights haven't been set correctly. So that covers the profiles. Privileges, I mean, there's very little for me to cover off in privileges, but you can see that I've got sort of 4 privileges here. I've got basic management, power user, and system admin, and these just, as I mentioned, they just give users access to certain areas of the product and certain functionality within the product. So, things like code-free, being able to bulk modify document references, delete attachments, delete nodes, move columns around and things like that. This is all dictated by a privilege preset. And there, you're probably fairly familiar with it. On the left-hand side, it's just broken down into sections that you can filter through and just assign an appropriate privilege accordingly. So that covers off security. Has anybody got any questions about security at this stage? Is there anything that you want me to cover off, or if there's a question specific to your configuration that maybe you need me to answer, then just let me know. So moving on, we have the next section, which is users. So the user section is essentially just the area where you can view all users that are, I guess, classed as internal because they've been imported from the Active Directory. So they're internal to your domain and your configuration, and then you've got users who are external. External members, users, are those that you've created manually, and they don't reside in your domain. They're sort of local users on your Invu server, which you create from within Invu. So I can cover that off in a short minute. I'll also cover off how to filter to be able to view inactive users and search for specific users. Because if you're a large customer with a large number of users, being able to find a user quickly is a good thing, especially if they've got a quirk that you need to try and iron out. Then being able to just run a quick filter and quick search is something that I can show you how to do. I'll also just do a quick demo of how to import a user from the Active Directory, just to add a new user to the system, and as well as creating an external member. So if we just flip to my Invu system, if I show you users to begin with, it's just on the left. Click on Expand Users and click on Show Users and External Members. I've not got a huge amount of users. There's 54 users there, 3 external, 51 internal domain users. If I add over sort of 100, 200 users, it might be difficult for me to filter through that list manually just by scrolling and trying to find a name, because after a small handful of names, it will become a bit of a blur and you forget what you're looking for. So in the top right hand corner of the central pane, there's a little blue filter icon, and you can see that we are actually filtering by default because we're hiding inactive users, and it does tell you whether or not there's a filter active. Click on the blue filter icon and it just expands a little filter section at the top. If I tick Show Inactive Users, that shows all inactive users and their little Lego icons. That's probably the best way to call it. And they're grey. Grey means they're inactive. And you've also got a search box here, so it's a real-time sort of live filter. So if I was trying to search for Tracy, as soon as I start typing, her name comes up. But I've got 2 Tracys there, and it gives me both. And it does a contains. When you're doing a filter, it does a contains. So I've typed in TRA, which has brought back the system administrator account, because there's TRA and administrator. Likewise for Housestrap, there's a TRA and Housestrap, and the administrator account, which has been pulled off the testing domain as well. And again, just hit reset or close, and then that will just reset the view. So if you're filtering, you can just hit close and your filter will just stay where it is. The filter gets reset on client restart. So yeah, as soon as you restart the client, that just resets to its default view, which is that. So yeah, so that's just a quick overview of the filtering. Inactive users, a good thing to be aware of is that if a user has left the business, in their logon tab within their properties, you just untick user is active. By unticking that, you make them inactive. The thing to be aware of is that you should also remove the products, because if that user's left, for example, and their replacement comes in, and you go to assign their replacements and products, chances are you may get a message saying that the selected product cannot be assigned because you don't have enough to allocate, or something similar. And it's because you've probably got some inactive users that haven't had their products removed. The reason we don't remove products when you make a user inactive is because we're not sure if you're making that user inactive temporarily or permanently. So the onus is on you as the admin to just remove the products when you make a user inactive. So that's just something to be aware of. If you've, like I've said, if you've just imported a user or trying to set up a new user, you're trying to allocate products and you get a prompt saying that you can't, just check to see if there's any inactive users who still have products allocated, and that'll probably fix those sorts of issues. So if we look at import users from Active Directory, if you've got multiple domains, this will just allow you to query the domain. If you don't type anything into the box, just hit Find Now, it will just pop off to the domain and bring back all users. That's probably something I shouldn't have done, but you can see that we've got quite a lot of users on our domain. Test accounts, user accounts, service accounts, all sorts. So you can just select one. So if I just grab a test account from down here, select it, hit OK, and you see my count has gone up to 52, and there's my account that I've just created, just imported even. And that's it. Because that's a domain account, it uses entity authentication just like any other user in Invu. Double-click the icon and it will let you in. So long as the user's got products assigned, won't be an issue. External members, these are slightly different to domain members or just regular internal users, in the sense that these are local users that exist on your Invu server. Generally, people create external members for testing. We've got some customers that we know of where they didn't want to create a domain account for, the reseller or even for us Invu. They would prefer to just not have an account on the domain that's purely for testing, if that makes sense. So you can create an external member which just creates local users on the Invu server. You'll see that my domain, if you ignore the domain name on my existing users, I've been messing around with my database, so that domain name, although it says Invu, it should say Sandeep Test. But I can create an external member. Just make sure I don't create one that's already there. I'll just call it webinar for now. When you create a external member, because it's a local account on the server, you have to specify a password that adheres to your password policy. So it's just a case of typing something in. Privileges, you can assign it at this stage. I'll give it management. And products. Click OK. Can take a minute, depending on the machine. You don't get prompted to say that was created successfully. It just disappears, and you're taken back to sort of the default create an external member screen with the login blank and the little icon flashing. When you see that means it's been created correctly. The reason we don't prompt you to say it's been done, and the reason we take you to this screen is because you may want to create multiple external members. So rather than kind of interrupt the process with prompts and messages and things like that, it just allows you to just quickly bang, 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 create them one by one after the other. So if I go to my external members, you can see I've got a webinar test user. My domain name is Sandeep Test. And then if we look at my PC, you'll have to bear with me, it's Windows Vista, so it's not that rapid. Go to local users. You can see that there's my webinar user, and in the description it's Series 6 external member, and it has to. We recommend doing this on the Invu server itself, because if you do it from a client PC, the user you're logged in to the machine the client PC has may not necessarily have permissions to be able to create local users on the Invu server. So log in as an admin on the Invu server, log into Invu as an admin, and create the member. So if I log in as that user, you'll notice that I have to put my server name before the username. The reason being is because it's not a domain user, the entity authentication won't work. So you have to put in the server name, / username, put in my password, and in 6.7, those of you who are running 6.7 will see this additional box on the login screen which says remember this username and password. If that's ticked, then you only need to enter the password once, and that's just on the first time that the user logs in, and then just log in. As long as I've not made a typo in my password, it will let me in. And there we go, so I'm in. I can see filing cabinets, I can see documents within them, or not, because I've not set myself up as a member on the filing cabinets, but I've got access to the system, so I'm in. And then because I ticked that box on the login, you can see it's just brought the details back. So if I just untick that and log back in as me, as the admin, and then I'm back in as the admin. When you tick remember username and password on the login box, the password is stored in encrypted format locally on the client's PC, so there's no need to sort of worry about, you know, credentials and things like that being stored in plain text. It's all encrypted and it's all pretty secure. Right, so that covers off users importing and creating. Are there any questions on that section before I move on to the next? If a user's been deleted, in Invu you can't actually delete a user because the user still has to exist for auditing, to maintain integrity of the auditing. So the most you can do is make a user inactive. So untick the user's now inactive, and if you want to bring them back, you just go back into their account and make them active again. Or were you talking about deleting users from the Active Directory? Okay, just Invu. Yeah, so users can't actually be deleted from Invu. We would never delete them from the database directly anyway, purely because they need to be there for auditing. So yeah, so you can make a user inactive and then make them active again if you need to. You can't have more than one user in the system, so you can't import a user with the same username. Although your domain might allow that. It's unlikely, but for whatever reason, if your domain allows it, you can't import two users with the same login name. Invu won't allow it because it won't be able to determine which of those users should have licenses and shouldn't on logon. So hopefully that covers off the user section. If there are any more questions, just let me know. The next section is just global settings. Just the general settings, notifications, and resource portal. These are the three areas that I'll just cover off. So on the left-hand side, just go into expand global settings and click on edit global settings. What that does is bring up the system properties screen, and then in the general section, which is always selected by default, and if you can select another one and click OK and whatever, but when you restart the client, it always takes you back to the general section when you go back into it. Here you can set thumbnail sizes. If people have got small screens, large screens, whatever, you can increase the size of the thumbnail or decrease it depending on their needs. You can set a maximum list of drop-down items. This is purely just to prevent confusion or improve the user experience. So in this example here, by default, my indexing is set to 100. So when I'm filing and saving, it will only return the most recent 100 items that have been used in that document reference to file. Whereas in searching, I may not want to return any cached information in the doc references. So I've just set that to 0 and said I'm not interested. I just want users to be able to free type without having the last 100 items being fed back to the user and filtered when they're searching. The other general options down here is I can limit the number of results returned when exploring and searching. Within within Series 6, within one of the third-party components that we used, that we do use even, when searching and exploring, there is a preset limit of the number of hits, the number of results that can be returned. I believe the upper limit is 50k. I'll have to double check that, but I think it's 50k. It can be increased beyond that, but we don't recommend it purely for performance reasons. But if you're performing a search where you're returning more than 50,000 results, then I would question your search. There shouldn't really be a reason why you're trying to return that many documents in one go, purely because it would take you forever to kind of filter through manually and find the document you're looking for. The second option that can be enabled is use temporary table, the TT folder, to populate temporary tables. If you've got a split server Invu install where your Invu services are on server A and your database is on server B on a dedicated SQL server, historically in previous versions of Invu, you would have had to create a share on your SQL server called TT, and then that share would have to be referenced within the Invu install, which would allow cross-communication between the Invu server and the SQL server. The TT folder was just a share where SQL transactions would be cached momentarily whilst the queries are being carried out in SQL Server. Since 6.6 even, 6.6.8, we've removed the need for that TT folder, so that option's there just for legacy purposes. If you're happy enough to have an open share on your SQL Server, then you can leave that ticked. If not, untick it. Performance isn't impacted. We're just using a different method in .NET 4, which allows us to perform SQL queries in a slightly different manner, which don't require a shared folder on the SQL Server. The show latest metadata only, that only shows, I guess the best way to put it is relevant metadata. So, for example, if you've incorrectly filed a document against or spelt a name wrong, for example, so, John Smith, it should be the capital S, lowercase M-I-T-H, but you've got some documents in there where it's capital S, capital M, lowercase I-T-H. You've then retrospectively gone back and recorrected all those indexes, but when you go to file and save, you see both names in the lists. What show latest metadata only does is just filters out those lists to remove metadata that no longer exists in the system, so you don't get false positives returned effectively when you're filing. I believe that's ticked by default on install, on upgrade, but it's probably worth checking. I know it's ticked on a new install. Whether or not it's ticked on an upgrade, I'm not 100% sure. It's ticked on mine, and I've done an upgrade, so I'm assuming it is. Use new autocomplete. This is a different method. We've changed, using the new autocomplete, we've just changed the way that we handle drop-down lists in Series 6 where there are large amounts of data, specifically relating to fixed lists. We had a customer through a reseller who, I think they're a university, and their fixed lists were just forever growing. I think they got to a point where they had 100,000 values in a fixed list, and that's because they have to have records for students that go back, 6 years or whatever, and they move years every year, so the list has to be updated every year. New students come in, old students leave, things like that. So they were getting to a point where the lists were over 100,000 values in total, which, had we not implemented the new autocomplete feature, their system would have just been massively unusable. So if you have got large lists or large amounts of metadata in fixed lists, or even just generally document references, where you're not limiting the number of drop-down list items, it may be worth using the new autocomplete. It does improve performance, and the user experience is improved. And also you can kind of define a drop-down list limit. So if you've got 100,000 values, but you may only want the first 2,000 or 200 return visible to the user. You can set that. They're visible, but it doesn't mean that anything that's not visible can't be used as indexing data. It just means they're not presented to the user in the front end. Printing, these options down here just allow you to enable print for i600 users. i600 is a view-only client, so all you can do is search and open. You can't put documents in. And print footers on viewer prints just prints the Invu number, I think the person who printed it, and a timestamp, just so you know who's done what and when. So that covers off the general section. Some few useful things in there that depending on your needs may improve user experience just generally within Series 6. So if we move on to notifications, here is what I mentioned earlier at the start of the WebEx, where you can configure notifications to be sent out to a predefined email address, a group of admins, so it could be a distribution group. It doesn't make any difference to us. You have to authenticate with your Exchange server using a valid account. Specify from email address. If your Exchange settings allow it, chances are it probably does. You can just spoof any old address, and you can just set a display name for the from. Email notifications can be sent and configured for group synchronization. So if you're synchronizing Active Directory groups with groups in Series 6, you can have an email notification sent out to yourself as an administrator to let you know if it was successful or not. Then you've got expired document deleted. So there is document retention in Invu. So what you can do is when the retention period has been reached and you've got your action for that retention period set to delete, you can have an email get sent out to the admin to say these documents have expired, the default action was delete, so therefore I've deleted these documents. And again, NetScan error, that just relates to NetScan and Link Manager. So if you use NetScan or Link Manager and there's a failure to import, or the service has fallen over, sorry, not the service has fallen over, the process has fallen over, the import process, then an email can be sent out to whoever you decide, that is your admin or yourself even, just to let you know that there's been an issue with an import. Please have a look at it. So it's just a case of going through the drop-down, selecting what you want to configure. So on mine, you can see that I've already configured myself for email notifications for the services. And all it does is it just looks at the email address within the user properties. Which is just in contact. So I've got my email address here. So what that section in global settings will do is, because the system admin account was in the list of users to send notifications out to, it will say, right, I need to send one to the system admin account. It will look at my details and say, right, if there's an email address there, that's who I'm going to send it to. And likewise, if you've got a group, you can have a group email configured in here, which is just a distribution group address or a single mailbox. It's entirely up to how you've configured your emails, and you can just have an email go to that designated user or group. So that covers off notifications, which just give you, a better oversight of what's going on within the system. Because as I'm sure you agree, the last thing you want is to hear from an end user that they scanned something in at 10 to 9 in the morning and it's now 3 o'clock in the afternoon and it's still not in Invu. It could be because there's been a failure during the import or some metadata is missing. If it's a link manager import from mandatory docref, and therefore the document couldn't be filed, so it's been failed. It's just good to have oversight of potentially any issues that may arise as a result of a failure of an import. I'm talking about NetScan and Link Manager specifically, but it can be the same for Active Directory group synchronization. If you set up some new users in the business who start on a Monday, you've configured the group sync on Friday, added users to the Active Directory group, but for whatever reason the group sync failed. It takes place at midnight every night, so the group sync just failed. It will be good for you to know that it has failed. So come Monday morning when your new starters start, you'd expect them to be able to get into Invu straight away, but they can't. You will have oversight of why, potentially, well, not why, but you'll have oversight of the fact that the sync failed, which will then help you investigate as to why it may have failed and what might have caused it. The next section in global settings is resource portal. But before I move on to that, are there any questions around the general settings and the notifications? Nope. Okay, so the resource portal, the reason I want to cover this off is because it just allows you to configure your own intranet, really, and some menu items and hyperlinks within the resource portal. By default, it points to our Invu's resource portal, which looks like this. So you can kind of go into product tutorials, download the documentation, and things like that. And then on the left-hand side, we've got different links. So if I click on Invu, it just brings up a web browser and takes me to the Invu website. And these options are all configurable in global settings and resource portal. So you may have your own intranet that you want users to be able to just have visibility of as soon as they launch Invu. And again, you've got menu groups which can be broken down. So I've got a menu group called Resource Portal and Invu. And again, you can just define new menu groups and menu items and assign those menu items to a group. So if I say, let's just call this Google. You can configure these to be whatever you like, but this is just an example. And you can set whether you want it to load in an external browser, and you just select an icon, give it that, hit the green plus, and it just ends up down there. And the link is active straight away. There's no restart of the client required. So as soon as I click Google, it'll just bring up Google. So you can have these points, if you've got any web-based CRM or any web-based application that doesn't reside within your intranet, but is accessible from your intranet, you could actually create links on the left-hand side that just fire up those from within Invu. So it's all self-contained within the product. There's no sort of faffing around between different screens and launching different applications. They can access those applications and those resources from within Invu. People know about the resource portal, but people don't necessarily know that it is configurable to a degree which will allow you to expose certain areas of your business and certain things within your own intranet or even externally. We have some customers who just point it to their webmail, so when they're out on the road, they just launch Invu, click on webmail, and they get their webmail from within Invu. They can access it from within Invu just by clicking on the link. Okay, so the next section is document reclaim. Are there any questions relating to the resource portal before I move on, or any aspect of global settings that potentially you may have come across in your adventures in Invu and just need a bit more information on? You might have seen something that you just need some clarification on, or a bit more information on. If so, just send us a question and I'll answer it. Got a question from a noob regarding the client API. I'm assuming you've seen that in the license. The client API is a license which, if you yourself have developed an integration from a third-party application into Invu, and that's done via the Invu's API. If you're developing an application, you have to license users who use the API to enable them to be able to access Invu basically from a third-party application using the API. So it's just a type of license which allows that to take place. Any other questions? Right, document reclaim. This allows you to see in-tray documents of inactive users. So if a user, a typical scenario is that a user has left the business, they still have stuff in their in-tray, whether it's emails, scans, invoices, whatever that they were working on prior to them leaving, but they just didn't have enough time to get it done. They didn't have enough time to get it done, and nor did they have enough time to move those documents or send those documents to somebody else. So what you can do within the document reclaim section is just get access to that user's in-tray who is now inactive, grab the documents and move them to somebody else's in-tray. I think by default it moves. You get the option to move it to your own in-tray as a system admin, and then from there you can move it to anybody else's. This saves a bit of time purely because if a user is inactive, you don't need to make them active again, you don't need to reassign a license, and you don't need to get logged back in to Invu as that user just to be able to move documents out of their in-tray. So if I just demonstrate that, just so it makes a little bit more sense. So you can see that I've got a fair few documents here. I've got a user called test. This is test in-tray, tests in-tray even. There's 36 documents or items that haven't been filed and saved. So what I can do is just highlight the batch, right-click, move to in-tray. I thought it highlighted the system admin in-tray by default. I was wrong. But yeah, you can move it to a group in-tray, a user in-tray, or even a folder in-tray. So if, for example, you've got a user who was a part of the finance team who's now left, you could, and if you've got a group in-tray called finance, you could move these documents to a group in-tray. So if I move this to a user left, documents need action. So if I move this to my testings group in-tray, that'll move 36 documents into that group in-tray out of document reclaim. Oh, that's nice. I'm not a member of the group. There we go. So I've moved there was already some items in this in-tray, so just ignore the fact that the numbers don't add up. But yeah, so you can see that I've moved them, and then from here I can file and save them, move them to somebody else's in-tray, and things like that. And you can see that the user that I moved was a user called test, who isn't active. The login name was test. There is no user called test, but if I if I tick show inactive users, you can see that was the user who had those items in his in-tray. And I was able to just move those out and push them to somebody else. So that's another useful feature. It also helps remove the need to try and figure out what a user was working on or what a user was doing when they left or when they were made inactive. Saves time having to rescan documents, just going through a whole faff of trying to figure out just essentially what they were working on before they left. So that covers up document reclaim. Any questions around that? It's a fairly straightforward, simple feature, but useful in my opinion. Right, the next section was Expunge. It's very simple, as I sort of explained earlier. It's much like the Windows recycle bin. When a document is deleted, it ends up in the Expunge area. Documents can be restored or permanently deleted. However, once they've been permanently deleted, they are not recoverable no matter what, unless you restore from a backup. So just use the Expunge feature with caution. So if I show you my Expunge documents area, you can see that I've got a few bits and bobs here, stuff that's filed and saved, stuff that's not. So I can either highlight a batch, right click and restore, or I can right click and expunge. Alternatively, if I know that everything needs to be deleted, I can just expunge all documents, or if I think someone's just deleted 20,000 documents by accident or reasons unknown to me, I can restore them all. If I know they all need to be restored, I can. The other thing is, from here, you'll see that you can't see any metadata. The reason being is because although the system admin's logged in, although I'm in the admin group, I may not necessarily have permission to see those documents, and that's irrespective of where they're stored. Even if they were originally stored in a folder that I've got membership on and I've got permission to see, I still can't see the metadata, and that's purely for compliance reasons, data protection and the rest of it. It's just the system doesn't know if the system admin should or shouldn't have rights to see the metadata, so therefore we just blanket it and don't display any metadata other than the document title, the Invu number, the version number, document modified date, who created it, and things like that. So we don't see anything else beyond that. So that's Expunge. So it's another useful area. So if we see it commonly where somebody's accidentally deleted a document and it just needs to be restored, and it's just a simple case of finding which document it is and then restoring it. So the next section, which is auditing. So the audit log can be filtered using a pretty large variety of criteria. You can pretty much audit every event that takes place within Invu. We've got a question about Expunge. If you expunge a document, it's permanently deleted, can't be restored. If a user, it's just like emptying your recycle bin on your computer. If you empty your recycle bin, you won't be able to retrieve or restore those documents again. Whereas if you just delete a document, which effectively in Invu sends it to your recycle bin, once it's in your recycle bin, you can restore from there. But once they've been expunged, they're permanently deleted, unless you have some backups that you can restore from, and then just re-import the documents that way. But when you restore a document that's been deleted, it restores back to its original location. So these documents here that are not filed and saved, these are in user in trays. So this one here is from the system admin in tray. So if I restore that, that would go back to the system admin's in tray. This one here, test 8, that would go to v6 test 1, that would go to my in tray, which is there. So if I just try and restore another one, yeah. However, if I delete that, and expunge it, that's disappeared. I have no way to retrieve that now. I have no way of restoring that unless I look at my backups, my SQL backups and my physical file store backups. And if you were to restore from a backup, you've got two options: restore your Invu system back to a point before you deleted and restore your documents, or just find the file from the secure store backup and just re-import it. It just depends on what's best for the business. So hopefully that answers the question. So the auditing, the audit log can be filtered, as I mentioned earlier, it can be filtered using a varying variety of criteria, anything down from document version deleted to user login, log out. Audit searches can be appended to, so if you were doing a search for the 1st of December to see who deleted what, and then you realise, oh wait, it may have been the 1st or the 2nd, rather than clear your search and redo a new one, you can just make some small changes in your search criteria and append it to the existing search, so you've got an overview. I've used dates as an example, but yeah, so you can just combine the two. Also, the audit results can be exported in their raw format for reporting. When I say raw format, it's probably best that I'll demonstrate that to you, because it's better to see it. So, administration, view the audit logs. So we can either query the audit log or search the audit log based on all users, so across the board, or we can search the audit log down to a specific user. I'll do it on my V6 Test 1 account. I'll look at what I've been doing today. So you hit the green tick and that selects all of the options down here at the bottom. So I want to search basically for everything that this user has been doing today. Hit search, and it brings back everything. And that's what I did earlier when I was checking the properties of the documents when I was doing the security. Document move. This is when I was in the document reclaim. Document restored. This was just a couple of minutes ago where I was restoring a document to my own in tray and to the administrator's in tray. And it gives me the Invu numbers in the title. I can't see any other information, no metadata. Any additional metadata isn't exposed in the audit history. I was editing folders when I was doing security. I was editing groups when I added myself to it, so I could see that those documents that I'd restored to the testings in tray were visible. And it does give you some basic information. So it tells me that I was editing something called a group called testings. With the ID is irrelevant. That's just the internal database ID. That's just mainly for us. I edited a group, and it tells me what I did within that group. So I added V6 Test 1. That's the login and the name V6 Test 1. You can also see that I edited security profiles, general, they're all general, and I also edited users. This is when I made the user inactive or active. So there's a fair few things that you can query on. The other thing that you can do is, so now I've got V6 Test 1, I want to look at the system admin account. I can select append results to current search. I'll leave everything ticked as it was before. I hit search again, and it just appends. It doesn't create a new section. It just appends to the existing subsections that are there. So you can see that security profile edited and user created, for example. They've now got the system admin audit events in there. Log in, log out. Group edited. The reason there's no login for my V6 test account is because I've been logged in since yesterday, and my laptop just stayed on overnight. Document restored, document previewed, so it's all there. And then the other thing that you can do is clear the search. You can even go down to a specific document. So if you're trying to, I'll use deleted as an example because it's a common thread that we come across. A document's been deleted. Nobody is admitting to deleting it. so we need to know who deleted it. So what we can do is just type in the Invu number for the document to see who did what on it. So let me just try and find. Let me just delete a document. So that Invu number is 34764. So if I delete that, go into audit history, 34764. If I wanted to, I could apply a date range, but because I know it happened today, I'll just leave it as today. But if you weren't sure when it was deleted, you can basically go back as far as you wish, just to find out what happened to that document in its history. So I've selected all options, hit search, and we can see that I, myself, V6 Test 1, had deleted that Invu number from this PC on this date and time. And likewise, you can see that I've moved it as well. So if we specifically were interested in trying to establish who deleted a document, then we can, let's just go back to this. Then we can just scroll down to document version deleted, hit search, and then that would do that. And likewise, you can append to it as well. So if I want to do, where is it? Document restored. Maybe not specific to an Invu number, but if I want to see if I restored anything. Whoops. Hit search, and it just appends it to the existing search. So it's flexible in what you can do. Yeah, the audit history is pretty flexible in what you can do in terms of querying it and trying to establish what's happened and who's done what and things like that. We've got a question asked about how many users can have system admin rights. As many as you like. There's no restriction on how many users you can add to the system admin group. We do recommend having at least one additional system admin, one additional user added to the system admin group. I'll just come out of auditing for a second. I'll cover off the export of the audit log in a minute. But if I just show you the admin group, by default, the system admin is always whoever the user. The system admin is a user that was used to carry out the installation. By default, that user is always in the admin group and the only user in the admin group. What we do recommend is you at least add another user into the admin group. Because your IT guy may not be around, who has the password for the administrator account, or whatever. Another thing to bear in mind is that although you add a user to the admin group, that doesn't necessarily give that user full access across the whole system. It doesn't automatically add users to the folder. It doesn't add the admin to security profiles. It doesn't override any security that's assigned to folders and dictated by a security profile. The system admin just allows the administrator admin access to be able to configure the system and add themselves and other users to folders, configure security and things like that. No, but let me just read that question again. No, if you want to add another user to the admin group, they use their existing license. So you don't need to buy a special admin license. As long as they've got a Series 6 S600 or an S650 license, they're a valid user within Invu. They can be added to the admin group within Invu itself. Got a question, are user licenses transferable between two databases within one company? That's a question for one of the sales guys. I think that may cause issues with the license agreement, which I'm not overly familiar with, to be honest with you. But if you like, I can have your account manager discuss that with you in more detail if you like, Anoop. S650 license is workflow. S600 is not workflow. How do you add more users? Steve, if you wanted to, are you talking about adding users to Invu or adding users to the admin group? Right, that's just in the user section, and that's just a case of clicking import users from Active Directory. I did cover this earlier, but I think you may not have been present on the session, so I'll cover it off quickly, but I won't go into too much detail because I am recording this, so we'll issue a link out to all participants if you wish to watch it again. Okay, yeah, so it's just a case of expanding users on the left, clicking import users from Active Directory, typing in a name, selecting it and clicking OK, and then assigning licenses. If you want to add that user to the admin group, hit Edit Admin Group, Members and Groups, Add, and then select the user that you want to add to the admin group. Okay, if you want to increase more licenses, yeah, that's something that you'll have to discuss with, if you're purchased Invu through a reseller, then discuss that with your reseller. If you're direct with us, then just let me know, and I'll have your account manager call you and give you a shout with some costs. Steve, do you want to just send me your email address, and I'll see if you've purchased through a reseller, and I'll contact you offline. Right, so I'll just cover off the rest of auditing, which was just exporting the results. Right, so if I just redo my search, my query in the audit log again. Actually, I'll just keep it simple. I'll search for everything. So this is a search I've just carried out. Has no meaning to me at the moment. It's just one that I've just selected everything on for today. You see that there's a little save icon, little floppy disk icon at the top, which allows you to export to CSV. If you hit save, yeah, I'll put it on my desktop. Call it audit export. If I go to my desktop and open up my CSV, and this is essentially what I meant by the data is in its raw format. There's no real formatting here. It's entirely up to you how you want to interrogate this data and how you want to present it. So yeah, it's just a CSV with just the raw data. So you can see the V6 test one. There's some entries here, which just tells you what I've done and when. You can see that I restored a document here. I've restored all these documents. So it's basically what we were looking at on screen, just in the CSV format. So if you wanted to run a report of some description to see how many users were scanning documents or the number of documents that were scanned throughout the day, you could probably do that by querying the audit log to see who created a document and when. Once you've got the list, once you've exported to CSV, you can tweak the CSV, tweak the data to give you the result you need in a more meaningful format. I believe at some stage in the future we're looking at enhancing this slightly, just to present it in a more user-friendly format, but the original requests from a lot of users that came in, they said that they would just be happy with the raw data, purely because they wanted to make their own reports out of it and do whatever they want with it. So that's that. So that's just exporting. It's just a little save icon and it creates a CSV. So that covers off the auditing. Any questions about the auditing? Right, the next section is secure storage. From this section, you can view secure store locations. You can perform maintenance tasks, which allow you to maintain the indexes, the metadata, and the content indexes, and you can maintain schedules and indexing times to dictate when you want OCR to take place, when you want indexing to take place, and things like that. So if we go back into Invu, on the left-hand side in administration, expand secure storage, click on maintain text indexes. You've got two options here, metadata and content. Actually, I'll start with show secure store locations. If you've got multiple secure stores, they're listed here. I've only got one, and it just tells me which server it's on and the location. So the secure store is where all my documents are. The database just contains all the records and the metadata. The physical documents are stored in a Windows folder structure in CSX data. So if I go back to maintain text indexes, from here I've got the option to do a reindex, a refresh, or a compress. Those three options are available both for metadata and content, except for content you just choose which secure store you want to perform your index on, your reindex on even. The metadata reindex, the refresh option, so the reindex option just basically to rebuild the index that's used for searching. The only time you'd ever need to do that is if your index has suffered corruption, you're receiving error messages when searching and things like that. Generally, it's caused by a corrupt index, so a reindex is sometimes what we would normally recommend is carried out. In more recent builds of Invu, the reindex is pretty fast. So historically, it may take, it used to take like 30, 40 minutes to do an index on an average size system. Now it can be done in like less than 5 minutes. The refresh just pretty much just does what it says on the tin. It just performs a refresh of the index, just to make sure that the data's the data integrity and the index integrity is valid. The data within it is correct. And it just performs a quick flush and a quick refresh of the index itself. Compress. If you have a really large system, I don't know, where you've got millions of documents, compressing the index can improve search performance and search speeds. It just compresses, as it says, it just compresses the size of the index. Smaller the index, the less time it takes to search within the index. Noise words and numbers are indexed by default on the metadata. On the content, they're not. They have to be selected manually. When you do a reindex on the content index, you have the option to attempt a re-OCR. That's never enabled or never selected by default. I would never recommend a re-OCR as attempted, purely because in older versions of Invu, we didn't support PDF OCRing, whereas in more recent versions, since, 6.2b, I believe we started supporting PDF OCRing in that version. So if you're a really old customer and you've been using Invu for quite a while, chances are you could have thousands, hundreds and thousands of PDFs in your system, and by attempting a re-OCR on those, it would create a massive backlog of documents that haven't been OCR'd. So I would leave that unticked. Index numbers and noise words, that's entirely at your discretion. On my system, it's small, so I ticked index numbers, and it doesn't cause any issues for me. I've ticked it purely because when I do demos and do WebExes, I can show the functionality, and it generally does the index fairly quickly. If you don't tick attempt re-OCR, all it does, and you hit reindex, all it does is it builds the content index in the same way it does the metadata index. It just goes through, rebuilds the index, and doesn't attempt an OCR. Compress does exactly the same as it does in the option for metadata. It just shrinks the size of the index, which allows for slightly faster searching or slightly improved searching sometimes you may have a request come through from your reseller or from us directly if you've logged an issue which does indicate that the index is corrupt. We will put in a request to either have a metadata reindex carried out or a content index carried out. Just be advised that it's not advisable to carry these out during the day, because when you do a reindex on either of them, it does prohibit searching until it's complete. So generally it's best to run it out of hours. But what you can do is do some of the legwork during the day and then set a schedule so it runs out of hours. So if I look at my metadata reindex, as soon as I hit reindex, I've got the option to perform the operation now or select schedule the operation. So I can schedule it for 12 at 10 past midnight, click OK, click close, and I've not got to worry about it. And then if I go to my schedules, you'll see that it's there. And then I can double click on it, make changes to the time if I need to, or if I want to I can just delete it and say, well, actually I need to cancel it because it's going to conflict with the backup that I'm running or some other maintenance that might be running. And that's just automated. There's nothing for you to worry about there. It's just scheduled and it will just do it. Indexing times. This is specific to the content index and OCRing as well. By default, Invu will OCR and index, pretty much in real time throughout the whole day, day and night. It will OCR and index if there's anything for it to do. What some customers prefer to do is stop the OCR process during business hours because their server may not be the greatest, spec might be lower than recommended, so what they choose to do is stop OCRing during the day, have the OCR process running at night, and it's in the indexing times where this is dictated. So you can say, I only want to index between between 5:30 and 8 a.m. the following morning, and I want to stop the OCR process. Oh no, I've done that wrong. Oh no, that's right, yeah, I only want to index between 5:30 and 8 a.m, yeah, and I don't want to stop the OCR process. So depending on your needs, your requirements, you can just configure how the back-end services function. So that covers off secure storage and just maintenance, just general maintenance of the indexes, just relating to performance and things like that. Any questions before we move on to the last topic? Right, so the last one is just scanning preset maintenance, create, modify and delete. This should hopefully be a very quick section. Scanner presets, this can only be done on the machine where the scanner is connected. Log in as an admin. If you've got a new scanner or you need to make some changes to existing presets, log in as an admin on that machine where the scanner is connected. Expand scanning, show scanner presets, and you can see that I've already got some configured here. So just double click on one of them, bring up the config, and here you can decide whether you want it to be single page, multi-page, destination in trays, type of file to store, black and white, TIFF with LZW compression or PDF, things like that. Yeah, PDF image only. And here you can apply some post-processing tasks. I guess once the image is scanned, it can invert the image, rotate. If you've got a scanner where documents come in at 90 degrees, you can flip it back round. You can, if you've got a dodgy tray on your scanner and you know that the angle is slightly skewed by a few degrees, you can apply a rotate based on that. Just set a custom value to rotate by, and it will do that. Deskew, despeckle, trim, remove borders, and remove hole punches. they pretty much do what they say on the tin. They just tidy up the image slightly, removing borders and whole bunches people use quite a lot because it just removes the black lines and the little black holes from a scanned image. If you've got a new scanner but you want to leave all your settings the same, it's just a case of clicking on the General tab down at the bottom where it says Name, click on the Browse, and you see that your scanner selection box pops up. Click on Select. I'm just going to select the same scanner, but in any other scenario, chances are you'll be selecting a different one. And here you can select whether you want to use the manufacturer's dialog box. If you've got a flatbed scanner, that should always be ticked. Use the scanner's auto feed. If that's unticked, you've just got to feed the paper in one by one. Duplex, do you want to scan both sides? Yes, no. Do you want to suppress the blank pages? And here, it's just 3 options: pristine, dirty, or very dirty. Just find a setting that suits you. We have found that with some Kodak scanners, the blank page suppression does conflict with the inbuilt blank page suppression within Kodak's scanner settings. So in that sort of scenario, what we would recommend is use the manufacturer's dialog box. And then use the blank page suppression within Kodak or Fujitsu or Canon or whoever scanner that you're using. Again, if you want to change the color mode, grayscale, color, you've got the options down here. So at the moment mine's configured for black and white, but if I wanted to, I could change it to color, 300 dpi. When I change it to color, I need to change my image, because at the moment it's set to 1-bit black and white. I just need to change that to 24-bit color or 16-bit color. And I think that addresses... Yeah, you can set a scanner to scanning color. If you've got a multifunctional device which scans and prints, the color settings would be dictated by the printer. So if you're printing a document, as long as you're printing, as long as on your printer settings and your options, you're printing color, not black and white, it will come out in color. So that's scanner preset and maintenance. Creating a preset is no different to editing one. You just give it a title. Select your source, Twain, and then select your scanner. Apply your settings here. Decide what type of file you want to store. I'll leave it as PDF, if I can find it. Black and white, 1-bit black and white PDF, and that's it. I won't do anything more than that. And once that preset's created, you saw that it just flashed up with a blank screen. Again, that's no different to some of the areas in Series 6 where once you've created it, you don't receive a prompt to say it was successful. It just brings up a blank one in case you want to create more presets. And once I've created it, it just appears down here in my list of presets. And again, if I've got redundant presets that are no longer required within the business, I can just highlight one, delete, click yes, and it's gone. And again, this has to be done on the machine where the scanner is connected, purely because you can't select a scanner that's not connected to the machine. So that covers off scanning and just administration in general. Question from Emma. It's possible that the question from Emma was that she's been scanning in documents and the thumbnails don't appear. It only happens on some documents. It might be that the thumbnails just haven't been generated at that time. There can be a slight delay from when you scan to sort of select the document, that the thumbnail may not have been created at that point. So normally I think if you give it a few minutes, refresh your in tray or whatever, select the document again. At that point, it should just pull down the thumbnail. The fact it doesn't happen with all documents would suggest that that's probably what the issue is. It's probably just a delay in the thumbnail being generated and then from it being pulled down to your Invu client. Also, if you're on the latest version of Invu, 6.7, we've got the document preview, which you may or may not be familiar with. That's just an extension on the right-hand pane, these little glasses. When you select a document, it just loads it for preview. And that works with Word documents, emails, TIFFs, PDFs, pretty much everything. So imagine I've just scanned this. So Emma, in your example, if the thumbnail doesn't appear, you can always click to the preview, which will then just pull down the preview of the document. So you can see that that's there. It's larger. It should allow you to zoom in slightly. So if you've got a lot of scans where you've just done a massive batch of scans and you need to know which one needs to be filed first and whatever, then you can just use the document preview, scroll through the lot, and you see an instant image on the right hand side that relates to your document. And the preview is, the document thumbnail is more of a push, the preview is more of a get. So when you select the document, it goes off to the server to pull down the thumbnail, pull down the preview even. Cool. Right. So I think that's pretty much the end of the webinar. Are there any other questions? Any other topics that you might want to see covered next time? Is there anything as an administrator you were hoping to see but you didn't get a chance to see? Let me know, or let us know, because we may just do another WebEx, sort of a part 2 to administration. Right. Okay. If you're on 6.7 and you can't see your preview, it's because the privilege hasn't been assigned to the user. So if I just go to my user here somewhere. Right, yeah, so it's in the privilege section for Workspace. Down at the bottom there's a document preview tab. So where you can't see your glasses for the document preview, just tick that option within the presets, privilege presets, and assign those to the users, and then that should sort you out. Yeah, this webinar is being recorded, and we will issue out a link to all participants, so you can share it within the business if you need to, or refer to it at a later date for reference. If you have any problems with Invu, if you email support@invu.net, if you're a customer that we can deal with directly, then we'll respond to you. If not, we'll forward your query onto your reseller or an appropriate partner who will be able to assist. So the support email address is support@invu.net. But if you have purchased through a reseller, then your first port of call should be the reseller. Question from Emma, refiling bulk documents. You have to refile each document when a name changes. Yes, Emma, there is a way around that. Again, it's a privilege. So if I show you the privilege presets, document, you see this option. Where is it? I think it's the top one. I may be wrong, but yeah, there's an option called bulk modified document references. If you have that privilege, you will be able to do purely what you want, what you're intending to do. So if we look at this, I right-click, select a batch, modify document reference. Let's just say I want to deal with the title. and I want to change it to, so you can see that these are all different titles. Let's just, for argument's sake, let's say they're called Client 1, and I want to change them to Client 2. So I change it to Client 2, hit OK, and it just modifies the document references for those documents that I've highlighted in bulk. Give it a refresh, and you can see that they're now Client 2. Emma, I think that's what you were after, unless I've completely misunderstood your question. Cool. No problem. So yeah, so if there aren't any more questions, there's more to come in the future. Like I said earlier, if there's anything else that you'd like to see covered during these webinars, please do let us know, because it does help. If there's something that we can kind of tailor to a subset of users, then yeah, we'd like to do that. Something that's relevant to what you're doing and what your business is doing, we'd most definitely like to do that. And if there's anything that can benefit other businesses, then we'd like to include that and share it. So yeah, so email info@invu.net if you'd like to see anything else covered. And thanks for your time today. We do have one more question, so I'll just go through that again. The multiple reindex. Yeah. Multiple reindex is the options in privileges in document. Ensure the bulk modified document references privilege has been assigned. Oh no, actually it may not be that one, thinking about it. Oh yeah, no, it is that one. Yeah, I've not got a profile of privilege preset assigned to myself, so I was wondering why that's not ticked. But yeah, ensure the bulk modified document references privilege preset is ticked. And then to find the documents that you want to edit, so I'll just redo the same batch. So these have all got a title of Client 2. Right click, modify document reference. And because I'm only considered interested in the title, I'm just going to filter it out, filter all the others out. So at the moment it's set to Client 1, so I'll just set it to, whoops, if I can spell, Joe Blogs. And then that just goes through, modifies the title, and then if you hit refresh, you'll then see that those documents have been updated. Yeah, Emma, that's right. It will, well, in my example, it will just change the title and leave everything else as it is. You can select multiple document references that you want to edit. I'm just to keep things simple, I'm editing the title. But what I can do is I can do this. Call the title John Smith. Call my workflow status as, I don't know, in review. These document reference titles don't mean anything, they can be called anything else. But the problem is if you've got all selected, you have to, I believe you have to specify something in all of them. Unless it's just a date. It's just a case of ensuring that whatever metadata needs to be selected is selected. The other option is to just select it, the fields that you're interested in. So if I wanted to just do title and length test, then I can just call this, do that, and then do that. So hit refresh, and then you see my title is now Mr. Smith, my length test is called John Smith. So you do have the option to either bulk modify all of the document references, or if you just want 2 out of 10 or 20, for example, then you can just hit on the little browse button beside the drop-down list. And by holding down the control key, you can select multiple document references. Yeah, I mean, you can edit the client name, anything pretty much. It's whatever suits your needs. If it's a document reference, it can be modified in bulk. Are there any more questions? Okay, cool. Yeah, if you have any feedback on the WebEx itself, just drop us an email to info@invu.net. And yeah, like I said earlier, if there's anything else that you'd like to see in future, we are going to be doing these once a month, I believe. We've already had, this is our 3rd one now, so the next one will be in the new year. But yeah, if you have any feedback or anything in particular you'd like to see, then just let us know. And hopefully I'll see you guys again on another WebEx in the new year. Thank you for your time.